Hello everyone, thank you for joining us for this presentation for the first digital and online international conference for realist research, evaluation and synthesis. In the next 20 minutes, I'll try to take you through the rescue approach, which is a combination of realist evaluation science with qualitative comparative analysis. Now, the underlying idea of this approach, of the rescue approach, is to synthesize research and evaluation findings by developing theories around mechanisms. Now, this might sound familiar because the research synthesis approach is also very similar, although it tries to focus not on theories around mechanisms, but on program theories. But why the mechanism? Because mechanisms, they can be found in every sector, domain, discipline, and even different program theories. And so this opens the door for a plethora of data and information to inform our theories. Now, in order to make sense of that bulk of data and information, we use QCA, qualitative comparative analysis, to pinpoint the relevant contextual conditions, meaning both necessary and sufficient conditions for a certain mechanism. Now, in this very short time of 20 minutes, we'll go through the principles of the rescue approach, look at qualitative comparative analysis, a very short introduction to QCA, look at some early examples of RE and QCA, the combination of them, and finally we'll look at the different steps of the rescue approach. But first, the principles. The principles of the rescue approach are similar to those of the realist evaluation science approach. This approach is the one put forward by Ray Pawson in his book, The Science of Evaluation, which goes a bit further than realist synthesis. So whereas realist synthesis focuses on specific gathering information, data on specific intervention, for example, conditional cash transfers, vouchers, performance-based financing, realist evaluation science takes a step further, and Pawson claims that, it's not about those interventions that occur in different domains, different sectors, etc. It's that all those different interventions have a similar program theory. So the program theory is the unit of analysis of realist evaluation science and should also be the focus of, or the unit of analysis of, a research synthesis. And so this is immediately the first organizing principle of realist evaluation science. Program theories act as a unit of analysis. But in order to communicate between different evaluations, between different research, between different sectors, disciplines, etc., we need a certain level of abstraction in order to speak a common language. It's only by speaking a common language that we can bring together all the findings and data from these different evaluations. Now, the third organizing principle concerns reusable conceptual platforms. These should be looked at as a kind of cloud that is out there. So the program theories, conceptual platforms are up there in the cloud, and evaluators, researchers can take a program theory from that cloud, implement it or try to research it, develop it further, refine it, update it, send it back to the cloud, and then continuously more and more evaluators, researchers can use the program theory from the cloud, bring it back down, study it, use it, and send it back up to the cloud in order to further develop it and effectively building a model. That's the fourth organizing principle. Fifthly, what is very important is adjudication. Adjudication between rival theories, because for every situation, there are different theories that can apply, that can help you to explain something. And so the idea of realist evaluation science is to adjudicate between those two rival theories and say, okay, this theory works here in this specific situation, this theory works here in this specific situation. So it's not necessarily about throwing away rival theories or throwing away some theories that don't work, but it's more defining the scope of a specific theory. Sixthly is trust. Trust is crucial because we cannot study everything. We have to focus on a specific part, go into depth, and we have to trust that the rest of the program theory will be studied later on, or will not seriously affect what we are studying right now. And this is also based on, of course, the continuous cycle of evaluation. We don't have to do on our own, have to do a full research, or we don't have to find a full-grown theory. But we can try to focus on one part, and then subsequent evaluators and researchers can focus on other parts, and together we can create a comprehensive theory. And so that's all in relation to the wheel of science, the wheel of evaluation science in this case, that has been put forward by Ray Pawson in his book. And then seventhly, the seventh organizing principle is organized skepticism, which means that all of the above steps, they demand judgment on the part of the evaluator. And so we need organized skepticism as a superintending force to overlook whether the claims being made, whether the interpretations being made are credible, are useful, are rigorous enough in order to be seen as scientific enough. So these are the organizing principles, which are also the organizing principles of the rescue approach, although a bit different. And one different part is the unit of analysis. So here we see all those circles. This is a figure adapted from Paulson's book. And all of the circles here are different programs. And so if we evaluate one, that's a single evaluation, of course. Now, realist reviews, and sometimes even realist reviews, will try to synthesize data or synthesize evidence from different programs, but all often within one substantive program domain. For example, employment, education, health, or development, and they will stick to that substantive domain. However, realist evaluation science says, it's not about those programs, it's not about those domains, it's about the underlying program theory, and programs from very different program domains can have the very similar program theory. And so program theories like incentivization, target setting, behavior change, or legal restrictions are possible program theory domains. The rescue approach takes another step back and says, no, those theories, those program theories are built from mechanisms, right? For example, target setting has probably something on extrinsic motivation mechanisms, the peer pressure mechanism, the self-efficacy mechanism. They all play a role in target setting program theory. The other way around, mechanisms are also present in very different program theories. For example, extrinsic motivation is relevant for incentivization, target setting, behavior change, etc. So we see that mechanisms as the building blocks of explanation in the rescue approach. Now, as it is very important, it's also important, of course, to understand how do we see a mechanism. Now, firstly, we don't see it as a causal chain, the CMO configuration, right? It's also clear, of course, central to the rescue approach, to every realist approach. CMO is not a causal chain. So it's not that the C triggers the M, which leads to O, because that would mean that we make two causal claims. C causes M, and M causes O. Right? So those are two claims. It's also not the case, not so, that the C and the M work together to create O. No, we rather see an ontological relationship between the C and the M. We draw from the ontological stratification made by Roy Bhaskar, which we see the domain of the real, the domain of the actual, and the domain of the empirical, with mechanisms at the domain of the real and the observations or the context also that we see in the domain of the empirical, if our experiences, basically. And so they cannot work together and create O because they are different at different ontological levels, right? Rather, there is a linkage, an ontological relationship, an ontological linkage between the mechanism and the context. And in the way, very similar how Paulson puts it, mechanisms explain causal relations by describing, and that word is very important, describing the powers inherent in a system. And that system then can be seen as the context, right? Moreover, mechanisms and structures from the domain of the real tell us what it is about that system. Again, tell us what it is about that system. Again, the system that generates the uniformity. Similarly, Professor Westhorp claims that mechanisms should involve the description of at least three things: the necessary components of the system, again also the system, necessary relationships between those components, and the processes or interactions. Now, put in reality, this means that when we're confronted with a realist evaluation, with an evaluation, with a study, we all often have actors, agents with power. We have groups with their own characteristics. We have leaders with characteristics. We have social and physical structures with their own characteristics. We have an intervention with its own characteristics. And we have the way the intervention is being communicated with their own characteristics, and so forth and so forth. All those characteristics play a role and they interact. And among those characteristics, there's also something called the outcome. Well, that we call the outcome. For us, that is the outcome of relevance. The relevant outcome, excuse me. And so all these characteristics form a system. They interact with each other. They form they are standing in a relationship to each other. And that system, that relation, those components that are relevant to the outcome, our outcome of interest, that's the mechanism. That's how we see within the rescue approach the mechanism. And so that mechanism is at the basic of our explanation, and we try to build theories around them. And we call that mechanism concept. The mechanism concept is based on what Gertz called concepts are theories about the fundamental constitutive elements. So here we see that ontological relationship between the theory and the mechanism. The analysis of concepts involves ascertaining the constitutive characteristics of a phenomenon that have central causal powers. Okay? So it's not so that the context or those characteristics have the causal powers to causally create the mechanisms. It's those characteristics constitute the mechanism and give the causal powers to the mechanism. So a mechanism concept is a theory concerning the fundamental conditions that constitute a specific mechanism. Now, how do we try to find those constituting conditions? Well, we use qualitative comparative analysis, and we'll have a very quick introduction here to QCA. It is developed by Chalaragyan. It is a set theoretic method and tries to compare multiple cases, not just 1, 2, 3 cases, but often 15, 20, even until 50 cases, trying to compare them. And it does so in order to find the sufficient and necessary conditions for an outcome to occur, in this case, the mechanism. And so set theoretic methods are approaches to analyze social reality in which the data consists of set membership scores. Now, what are set membership scores? So a set, for example, the set of high-income countries, and we define that set as countries which have a GDP per capita which is higher than $12,000. Right? And so Belgium has a GDP per capita higher than $12,000. So it is in the set of high-income countries. So it has set membership score 1. Uganda, for example, does not have a GDP higher than 12,000 per capita, which means that it's out that set, so it has set membership score 0. Now, different countries can be in different sets, in the set of high maternal mortality, high suicide rate, etc. So, and the idea of QCA is to find the relationships between those different sets. And in order to, and when it does so, it tries to unravel the sufficient and necessary conditions and emphasize complex causality. Now, here is a small example with facilities. So here you see facilities that are well-financed and well-performing facilities. So these are two sets, well-financed facilities, well-performing facilities. Here, these facilities are not well-financed but well-performing, and these are not well-financed nor well-performing. And we see that it is necessary for a well-financed, if a facility wants to be well-financed, it is necessary in this data set for it to be also well-performing. Any well-performing facility, if it's not well-performing, it is automatically not financed. So well-performing facility is a necessary condition for it to be well-financed. The other way around, a well-financed facility is a sufficient condition in order for it to be well-performing. And so you see the interaction between set relations and how this can lead to causal claims, causal conclusions. Of course, they have to be based on empirical research and on theory to understand the causal direction. Now, how do we find those important sufficient and necessary conditions? We do it through using a truth table and a minimization process. So here we have the set A, B, and C. So these can be set of high-income countries, set of high maternal mortality rate, and a set of high expenditure on health, for example. And so these are the cases, and these are all the cases which have these conditions. I have one set membership score in set A, one in set B, and one in set C. There are 5 cases that have A1, B1, C0. And then we go look at the outcome. Okay, and here we assume that it's all very coherent, consistent. And so all the 3 cases have outcome 1. All the 5 cases here have outcome 1. All the 12 cases have outcome 0. So this is our truth table now. And if you want to understand the necessary and sufficient conditions of our outcome 1, we try to minimize this truth table. And so we start with those cases or those combinations of conditions that have outcome 1, and we create a solution term here, which is still complex. After we have this solution term, so all these solutions tell us it will lead to outcome Z. Now all these can be minimized by, of course, looking at here. If A and B is present, it doesn't matter whether C is present or not. So that means that we can minimize this explanation, this social solution term, to AB, because C is irrelevant, it's redundant. Here it goes again. The absence of A and C. When A and C are absent, it doesn't matter what B does. It doesn't matter whether B is absent or present. It doesn't matter. It both give the outcome Z. So we can minimize this to AC. And then we have a much easier solution term stating that if A is present and B is present, or if A is absent and C is absent, that gives us Z. And so this will then be used for our theory building. And so this combination of realist approach and QCA has been done before. I show you here 3 different articles that use a combination. And let's just look at how 2 of them approached it. So here we see the C and the M and the O's, right? Here how they define it. And here we see the solution terms, and we see that they combined the context conditions and the mechanism conditions that then lead to one outcome, right? So they try to find, using QCA, here it is very same. So here the article by Befana and colleagues. Here's the outcomes, output. And here you have 2 mechanisms, 3 context variables, and here they are combined in solution terms. So what you actually try to understand is which combination of context and mechanism led to outcome. But as we already looked at for the rescue approach, this is not the best solution, because C and M, they are the different ontological relationship, a different ontological level. So it's not so logical that they are put in the same analysis. So we have a different approach. The rescue approach takes as conditions the contextual conditions, the C are the conditions, and the outcome is the presence of the mechanisms. So we're looking at the solution term looks at the sufficient and necessary conditions that constitute a mechanism. And in that way, that solution term will be created and developed into a mechanism concept or a theory around a mechanism that tells us and explains us when, why, and how a mechanism gets triggered. Now, what are the different steps? In our last 2 minutes of the presentation, there are 5 steps to this rescue approach, and they're very similar to any realist evaluation. Of course, we start with the initial program theory, and so we started by identifying the relevant mechanisms of the intervention under study. They can come from theoretical conceptual frameworks, policy papers, etc. Self-efficacy, intrinsic motivation, etc. And we subsequently start looking for theories that identify for us the relevant contextual conditions, which we all then combine. All these mechanisms and all these theories we combine in an initial mechanism concepts. Right? Based on these concepts, we know what to look for. We know which conditions to look for. And this we will do in a case-based review. Case-based review means that our focus of our review are cases, not studies, cases. So for example, performance-based financing in Rwanda can have 5 different studies and then 5 different articles, papers, protocols, policy documents, etc. can all contribute to our data generation. And we collect all the data around that case and fill in a data matrix which contains all the information about the conditions and whether the mechanism got triggered, yes or no. Now in the third step, we create a data matrix which contains the set scores of these different conditions, after which we perform in step 4 a qualitative comparative analysis using the tier-guided enhanced standard analysis. This will give us a solution term which then will be used to update the initial mechanism concept or the initial program theory. And so here we see a circle, and indeed it is a continuous cyclical process where we continuously update, and in different rounds we strengthen and we refine our mechanism concept, our theories around mechanisms. And so this was very quickly the description or the explanation of the rescue approach. For more information, you can always, or comments or critiques, you can always send me an email or look on the rescuestudy.com, or visit this site where you can find relevant substantive theories or contribute even to this list. Thank you very much for watching.